Okay, so very good afternoon once again. So today we will do few topics. Means looks some small topics, but yeah, they are on importance. So we'll see that. Okay, out of the if all three we will able to complete or two. So I will brief you means one by one when we'll do this topic. So net firewall, I hope some of you might have heard about it. Then there is one uh, problem with IPv4 protocol that means that call as IP datagram fragmentation. So that we'll talk about, and then one will see the DHCP protocol. It is called as a domain host control protocol. This protocol is basically used when we connect a machine to our network. Let us say you come to, let us say, campus, and then let us say you want to you are connecting your machine to your in your hostel room or maybe in institute building somewhere, either Wi-Fi or through wired network. Then how your machine is getting an IP address? So one way is that, okay, your machine IP address to be assigned manually, every machine, every host which is connected into the network, and that looks very cumbersome. And so there is an automatic process that is enabled or facilitates by the DHCP protocol. So we will understand what is DHCP protocol and how it works and how your machine gets an IP address. Before that, we'll just means complete the portion which left from the previous lecture. So if you remember, we were discussing about this inside the router. So inside the router we have, so router basically have the three parts: input port, output port, and then the switching fabric. So switching fabric, we have discussed there are three types of switching fabric is there. One is a memory based, that earlier routers used to have the memory base, and that's very slow. Then bus based, and then the crossbar kind of internal architecture, which gives me more, you can say, which allows the parallel data transfer between the input and output port. Right. So that we have discussed. We'll see that at input port and output ports, how the packets buffering can occur, right? So let us see in this example uh, what situation. So one scenario is given here that, okay, you have a three input port and three output port, right? So for simplicity here, we have considered that, okay, input and output ports are means different. This means router is receiving from some ports, and some port it is using for transmitting the datagram. So one end receiving, and the other three ports are used for transmitting the datagram. So these are output ports. But as I mentioned, uh, in practice, in practical scenario or real world scenario, you have same port can be used for input and output. So it has a different line cards for input and output, right? So you receiving and transmitting can be done on the same port as well. Okay, so now you see this, in this case, three input ports are there and three output ports are there, and let us say this is a situation in which you have two packets in first and then one packet in second input port, and two packets are there in the third one. So now after processing, means it is extract the destination IP address, as you know, and then after that it consult with the forwarding table and found that the destination output port for this packet that belongs to the first input port and third input port is same. Then at a time, you know that only one can be transferred because his output port contention is there. So one will be transferred. And in the next round, the other will be transferred. So when this is transferred, means this will be moved from the input port to the respective output port. That time this packet is waiting basically. So we say this, we call this as a head of line blocking. Means one packet is waiting for the other packet to get transmit first, right? So that is, and this is a notion of basically buffering. So because of the contention, due to contention also buffering is packets can be buffered. Or packets can be buffered due to if my incoming rate is more than the you can say the processing speed of the switching fabric speed, right? So fabric is slower than the input port in combined. So if your fabric, so in combined input port rate is more than the fabric speed, then always there will be an input port queue will be built up. The queue which we have seen, which is building, which we saw that okay, it's built up at an input port. Similarly, the queue can build up at output port also. So in output port also you require the buffering. So it is required when the datagram arrive from the fabric faster than the transmission rate. So let us say this is a router and let us say this is input. So input to output, you know, the input at input port also buffering can be there. Once it is transferred and to the respective output port, here also buffering can be there. If this rate means it is in bits per second. So at rate at which the packet can be transmitted, that rate is lesser than the your fabric speed. Fabric is faster than the, suppose fabric is transmitting or fabric is forwarding 2 packets in a unit time to the on an average to an output port, and as 2 packets, and then out this link speed is the transmission time which is taking, that is in that duration of time it can transmit only 1 packet. So basically your fabric speed is twice than the link speed. So then definitely your, if this is the scenario it is there, then over a period of time your queue will be consistently it is going on, then the queue will be building up, right? So the buffering required when datagram arrive from fabric faster than the transmission rate. And at output port, although we are not discussing in detail this thing, but at output port router also implement some of the queuing algorithms or buffering queuing algorithm basically we say. So when you have a multiple packets in the buffer or on any output port buffer, then out of these packets which packet will be get transmitted first, means how to schedule the packets basically. So one simple algorithm is that is a first in first out or first come first serve. So that's a very simple, that okay, packet which enter into the queue first, that packet will be transmitted first, or that packet will get chance to transmit first. That's a very simple algorithm. But in this algorithm there are certain there in this algorithm. So one of the problem, first of all, that there is no you can say fairness is not maintained in that. Suppose this port is getting the packets from the different multiple flows, right? Traffic flows which are coming from different we are coming from a different source and destination pair. So now the flows which are sending, so in case of FIFO what will happen, the flows which are sending the packets at a higher rate, these flows will get more chance to their packet to be transmitted, and ultimately these flows will get more bandwidth, output bandwidth, because these flows packets are transmitted more, so these flows will get more bandwidth share as compared to the other flows. So this is inherent problem in the FIFO. So like that, some other issues are also there, but okay, we are not going in much detail here in as far as this course is concerned. Then other algorithms are also there. You can see there's a FQ algorithm which is called as a fair queue algorithm. So fair queue algorithm takes care of this fairness among the flows, means the amount of bandwidth that each flow is going to get. It take irrespective of the sending rate of you can say each flow. So the simple implementation, one simple implementation is you can have a logically multiple queues corresponding to each flow, right? And then you can apply a round robin mechanism. So one packet from this, one packet from second, and one packet from third, like 3 are there. So then packet level fairness you can achieve, but you can understand that packet level fairness is also not giving guarantee at a byte level fairness, because maybe this flow is generating packets, smaller size packet as compared to the other flows. So there are variant of fair queue algorithm which gives or provides the byte level fairness as well. Okay, I'm just giving some idea about that as I said, that not much detail here. Then weighted fair queuing, as if you want to assign some kind of a priority to certain flows because of, let us say, real-time traffic, you want to give some more priority. So you can assign weights also. Then there is another popular queuing or scheduling algorithm is which is used in commercial routers is RAD. RAD stand for random early discard or random early uh, detection. Random early discard or random early detection. Both versions are there. So that is quite popular algorithm for scheduling. It takes care, it means it basically this RAD is not allow the queue to be full, because queue is full, then there is a one problem which is called as a full queue problem, we'll say, because in full queue case your average delay is maximum, right? Average packet delay in the queue. If you allow queue to be full, and usually the buffers are very large, then in full queue situation you have a lot of delay is there. You know that delay, more delay may incur, you can say, premature timeouts, right? And due to that, unnecessary retransmissions going to happen, right? So that's why the delay should be some bounded. So this algorithm RAD uh, contains the queuing delay by in a some threshold by not allowing the queue to be full. Okay, like that there are so many other algorithms are also there. So ultimately what we need to take from here is that for scheduling the packets on the link, routers implement or the in the routers the queuing algorithms been implemented, which are some of the popular algorithms are FIFO, FQ, weighted fair queuing, random early discard, and so on. So now this buffering have two issues. Means one is that whether it is happening at an input port or output port. So buffering, that there is two consequences of the buffering. One is the delay; it increases the delay, average delay of the packet, and second is if buffering is increasing consistently, means, and at one point of time your buffer will be full, and then due to overflow packets will start dropping. So output port queuing, why the queue builds up at output port, if your switch R switch, means your switch fabric is n times faster than the R line, means this fabric is n times faster. So you have n input and output links are there. So n, in this case it is n equals to 3. So here also 3. So whatever the speed, the switch fabric have a 3 times speed than the single input line. So in that case you may have a output queue buffer also can be or output queue can build up. Okay, so this is about the completes our router architecture. So basically 3 components, and we understood that buffering, about input buffering can occur, output buffering can occur. So if you want to design a good switch, basically you need to make switching fabric if slow and your link speeds are high, then the link speeds are higher than the switching fabric speed, then there is no point actually then, because you are not getting any benefit of the high link speed, right? So switching fabric also should be compatible to that. Otherwise, there is no point. You have a 10 Gbps link on which the packets can be either received or transmitted, but your switching fabric is 10 times lower than that. Means it's a 1 Gbps rate only it can forward the packets from input to output. Then certainly that switch design is not considered as a good switch design, because the user is paying for 1 Gbps link input and output port, but switching fabric is not up to that rate. So there is no benefit you are getting in terms of overall performance. So that needs to be taken care by the switch designer, that input output port speed and switching fabric speed should be comparable, so that we can get a maximum performance. Okay, so now we just look at means where we are right now. So you know that we have discussed the transport layer, right? Above this application layer is there. Right now we are at the network layer, right? And we know about the functionality of the network layer in terms of the forwarding table. Network layer, one of the job is that it forwards the packet from one hop to another hop. So for that, uh, routing protocols construct, or you can say routing protocol builds the forwarding table. So routing protocol we have not discussed. Basically, they used to select the which path will be chosen between the source and destination. Based on that, the outcome of the routing protocol is basically a forwarding table, which is used to forward the packet from at the router from one input port to a output port of that router, right? So this we will discuss in a subsequent classes. IP protocol we have discussed means addressing convention, datagram format, and the packet handling convention. These that we have already discussed. Yes, this protocol we have not discussed. That is another protocol which is used at IP layer, that ICMP, Internet Control Management Protocol. I hope that you remember the traceroute program. I think traceroute application we have talked about in the beginning, very beginning of the semester when we are in the lab. Also, you have maybe uh, used this program. So, what is the purpose of this traceroute program? What it does or what it gives?
We used to calculate RTT time, sir, router.
So basically, it gives me the um, RTT for each hop between the source and the destination pair, right? So suppose this is a source and this is a destination. In between, there may be a multiple hops are there. We don't know that because this path is provided by the routing system. So assuming this is a current path is there. So here is a host is there, and suppose here I am just connecting to this. So this is a client and maybe this is server. So uh, a packet goes. So if I want to know that, okay, RTT for the first hop, then RTT for the second hop, then RTT for the third hop, RTT for the fourth hop, and final this thing. So I want to know that exactly what is a path and what is the value of RTT value with respect to each hop. This is achieved through the ICMP protocol basically. So this traceroute application uses ICMP as an underlying protocol uh, to get to know this thing. So we'll see that, okay, the purpose of this is error reporting and router signaling purpose. This ICMP protocol is used. We'll do maybe in a next class this thing. So this is the stuff which is left, and then we'll do the multicast protocol also, multicast routing also we'll talk about, okay, which is not mentioned here. So multicast routing and the protocols. So that also we'll talk later. Okay. So now we'll move to this interesting topic is how does a host get the IP address? Means when we connect our machine, then how means in an organization, then how my machine is getting an IP address. Like in hostels, you people connect your laptop or desktop machine, then how it is getting the IP address. What is the uh, process for that? So one method is that, as I mentioned, that it can be hard coded by the system admin in a file. And in a Windows, this is a file that is control panel and network configuration and TCP/IP properties. If you go, you can hard code the IP address. But you know that, okay, like in a bits, our campus do this thing. There is automatic process is there. It is not hard. It means nobody is coming and telling you, oh, you can use this IP address, you can use this IP address. That's very cumbersome actually. Then in Unix, I have a separate means file where you configure the IP address if you want to do the hard coding. But as I said, hard coding looks very cumbersome task. So there is a protocol which automate that entire process, right? So and so this is called as a DHCP, Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. So using that, a host can get dynamically the address from a server, and the server is called as a DHCP server. So DHCP is also a client server kind of a protocol, and most importantly, it is a plug and play protocol. So plug and play, you understand that, okay, you don't have to uh, basically you connect your machine and then you will automatically the protocol, if your DHCP server is there that is configured in your network, then it will initiate some messages, and with the help of that it will get the you will get the IP address, your machine will get the IP address, right? So it is useful where, and there are means use cases where, means first one example, let us say it is useful where the host joins and leave the network frequently, right? So take one example, say for example you have 2000 total customers, but you know that at a time 400 users only, or customers or users, they connect to the network. So if you hard code, then you have to give 2000 IP addresses and at least a block of 2048 IP addresses, if I but if but you know that okay, my at a time requirement is not for the more than 400 IP addresses, because at a time my user are not more than 400. So then you can survive with a 512 block of IP address, 2 power 9 block of IP address is sufficient for you, right? And then you can use the DHCP. So whosoever is using, that fellow will get the whatever the free IP address currently available in this block, and then when you use it, and then it will go away after maybe 1 hour or 2 hour, this way. Say for example, if you are going to the library and then you connect to a different subnet, so there you get a IP address, and then you come back to your hostel and then you connect your machine to the hostel, right? And that is a different subnet is there. So when you change the subnet, basically your IP address is also supposed to change, because that's this is the way, because IP address is a location specific. Your network change, then the IP address is also changing, because we know that subnetting, how it works. In each subnet you have a range of IP address which is allowed, right? So according to that you will get that respective IP address which is available in this range. So now what is available, what is not available, how much have been assigned, and all these things, this bookkeeping by the DHCP. Okay. So let's see that how it works. So the goal is to allow dynamically obtain its IP address from network server when it joins the network. Uh, so when the DHCP server gives an IP address, then this is given for some lease time. So that lease time is configurable. You can configure either 1 day, 2 day, 3 days, 7 days, 10 days, whatever lease time. And there is a provision to renew the lease also. Means you can run the command renew, and then it renew your lease and extend the lease for the next one more you can say day or week, depends upon how it is configured. So it allows the reuse of addresses only, hold addresses while connected. So addresses can be reused. As I mentioned that 2000 users are there and only 400 at a time are connected. So basically one address maybe sometime when I go, then that time I use, and after once I come out from there, that address is now free. Now you went and then your machine might have been assigned the same IP address. So addresses are reusable in that case. If the dynamically people are connecting their machine to the network and leaving the network. So mobile users, certainly it is beneficial. So we'll just see that, okay, how this DHCP work. So let us say this is a subnet. Ideally, in each subnet, one DHCP server is required. Means because in any subnet, suppose a new client machine is joining, then that DHCP server should respond. So there is a communication between this host, which is want to connect to the DHCP server. That so according to that, you require in each subnet your one DHCP server is required. But in practical scenario, means you in your network you other, because in this case every subnet, suppose you have 50 subnets are there, so 50 DHCP servers are required. So that looks very costly, right? So it's better that there's a one DHCP server is there in your entire network, and then the router through which this DHCP server and your different subnets are connected. So that router have a relay agent basically. right? So relay agent, and that relay agent knows the DHCP server destination, means its IP address it knows. So it all the DHCP message initiated by the host that is relayed or forwarded by this router, this relay agent which is running on the router to the appropriate subnet in which the DHCP server is there. So just one instance of the DHCP server is sufficient to for this purpose, right? Now we'll see that how this protocol works. Very simple protocol. So initially, let us say this is arriving client, and that client wants to connect. So once you either connect the cable, LAN cable, or you connect through the Wi-Fi after putting your authentication login password, then your machine is supposed to be connected to the network. Now the first job is to get the IP address. So for that, DHCP protocol will activate it, and DHCP discover message it will send. Now this message, you know that it is a broadcast message basically. Why it is a broadcast? Because initially this machine itself don't have any IP address, and the machine also don't know that, okay, where the DHCP server is there. So it is broadcasting actually. So you can see the information source, because no IP address is there. So it's a 000, not no IP address is allocated, and the port number the DHCP client uses 68. Destination is a broadcast, so it's a 255 all broadcast, and 67 is a port number where the DHCP server runs. So that's why port number 67 is used, right? And this YI address is basically your internet address. So this is a basically DHCP discover and offer all the messages have a same format. So this field is useful when the server will reply. But initially, because client don't know that my address is what, then that's why client address is also 00. And all the messages have a unique transaction ID. So this have a transaction ID 654. Because messages can be dropped, maybe client can initiate multiple messages, right? So in that case, uh, uniquely we can identify, okay, when a client is getting the reply, it knows that, okay, which message reply is coming actually. So in that scenario, this transaction ID helps. So because it's a broadcast, so the DHCP, your message will reach to the DHCP after maybe one hop or two hop, depends upon the client is connecting through which subnet, the subnet which is in which the DHCP server is there, or maybe through a different subnet. In case of the different subnet, as I mentioned here, that okay, suppose it is coming, the client is coming from this subnet, right? So in that case, it will forward your DHCP discover message in this direction, that relay agent which is running in this router. And if it is client is coming from this direction, then the message will be forwarded in this again where the DHCP server is there. And DHCP server location and IP address is known to the this relay agent. It's able to forward the DHCP message to the subnet where the DHCP server is connected. Okay. So it will reach to the server, and then the server will send the DHCP offer message. So in offer, source IP address, the IP address of the DHCP server, which is 223.125, port 67, server side port 67 is there. Destination, it takes from the discovery message, that broadcast message which received from the client. And now it is offering this address according to this client's address. So the client is saying 223.1.2.4. So this is the IP address which is assigning to means this client. Then transaction ID same, because the request was 654. So reply as, so that is matching that, okay, corresponding to this request, this is a reply. Okay. And the lifetime of this means it is offering for 3600 second. As I said, this is a lease time. How long this address will be valid? This is a configurable parameter. Network administrator can configure it. Okay, class right now. So this then after offer, then DHCP request. So a request message is sent by the client. So still the IP address is not assigned, because it may happen there are multiple DHCP server in the network, and these multiple server will offer the IP address to that, right? So as this message DHCP offer message send, it is not assumed that okay, yeah, this IP address will be now used for this client. Unless we are not getting any acknowledgement from the client, because client may receive multiple DHCP offers and it reply just one offer. Uh, Other offers are not replied, not send any acknowledgement. Basically, then these corresponding will not consider their offered IP address as a consumed IP address, right? So that's why here still the machine did not get an IP address. Machine has to confirm that, okay, I received this request. Now it is sending DHCP request saying still the source is 000, destination again it is a broadcast only, and this address, this address it copies from the offer message, right? And transaction ID, this new message is there, so 655, and lifetime it is same as whatever there in the offer message. And then it is acknowledged by the DHCP server. Now this machine got the IP address that now onwards any communication will go from this machine that will show the source IP address as a 223.1.2.4. So the 4 messages are exchanged between the client and the DHCP server to get an IP address that client, right? So in case multiple DHCP offer gets, client may respond to just take one request based on the one offer. It send the request and then corresponding acknowledgement comes from the DHCP server, and that IP address is now used for the further communication until this lifetime is over or lease time is over. And then after lease is released, then the IP address will be this IP address will expire, and then either before that renew is done, or maybe need to request it again. Okay.
So
Yes.
So in the case of DHCP offer, how will the router know to which system it has to send this packet? Because it doesn't have any IP address, right? The host is just trying to connect to the network. So
yeah, so
yes.
that relay agent, basically that relay agent knows that okay, this DHCP discover message came with the transaction ID this, and that was came from this interface, right? And when the offer come, then offer also it will send through the relay agent to the corresponding client on that, because this is also a broadcast actually. So from this transaction ID, that client identifies that okay, this message belongs to me actually.
Okay, sir. So if there are multiple hosts which want to join at the same time, then like this DHCP discover and offer will be broadcasted to every host, right? So that they realize.
So broadcast means basically, suppose it's something like that. Suppose this is a wire on which the multiple machines are connected. So the message will appear to all of them. Now, whosoever means means now everyone can take it based on, they need to see that okay, which whether it belongs to me or not. So suppose the message is there and everyone can take it, but who will take it, that decided based on the field. Also means here the layer 2 protocol also right now actually, because we are not aware of the layer 2. So based on the MAC address, the message is forwarded as actually, because for that ARP protocol is first. So MAC address is basically when the machine is connected, its MAC address is there, right? And because this is a IP packet is a datagram is created, and below it is a frame needs to be sent, right? So frame link layer packet which is called as a frame, that frame uses the identification as a MAC address. So right now, because that's why I did not talk about this frame and all when I discussing this. So the forwarding done by the means on the link, it is based on the MAC address. And at least interface router knows that, okay, so because router also, this router is also have all three layers implemented: physical, link layer, and the network layer, right? So network layer gives the packet to the link layer at a sending side, right? So datagram is created and then it hand over to the link layer. Now link layer then create a frame and add its own header in terms of source, destination, MAC address, along with other header fields are also there. So makes the complete, you can say, source to destination packet movement.
Okay, sir, got it. Thanks.
Not the transaction ID, sorry, it's relay agent, not the transaction ID. Basically, that link layer frame, because MAC address is something is that machine have. Right?
Oh, yes, sir. Okay, got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So now we'll do this. If you remember, I mentioned this IP datagram when we were discussing the header fields of IP datagram. The same, I think, same slide I used. In this, I told you that, okay, for these three header fields we'll talk later. So what are these three header fields? It is a 16-bit identifier and flag and the fragment offset. So this is basically, these three header fields are used for fragmentation and the assembly. So now first we'll understand what is a fragmentation and why the fragmentation is required actually. So see this scenario. So if you remember, I have mentioned one more thing that, okay, every link have its MTU. MTU is stand for the maximum transfer unit. Maximum transfer unit. Right? Each link have this, means this is the maximum size of the packet, or you can say frame basically, or maximum payload at a link layer that can be received in a single packet, right? So for example, for Ethernet 802.3, which is a layer 2 protocol, and we also call this as a Ethernet LAN. The MTU for this is a 1500 bytes. Means a fragment size of 1500 byte is the maximum fragment size which can be received or which can be transmitted over a Ethernet link actually. So you know that these links, layer 2 link, if you say any layer 2 technology is used here for on these link. It can be a Wi-Fi link, it can be Ethernet, it can be satellite, or it can be any other protocol stack, Zigbee or Bluetooth. So every link layer protocol, according to the link layer protocol, you can say design, this MTU is defined for that link, right? So between the source to destination, you may have a multiple links, or different types of links are there. So each link have its MTU is different. So as I gave the example for Ethernet, it is a 1500 bytes. What does it mean? So 1500 byte payload is the maximum payload can be received by a Ethernet link. If it is more than that, then that needs to be fragmented, right? So any IP datagram which is with the more than 1500 payload. So in this 1500, you know how much data is there at IP layer, because IP layer have the 20 byte header is IP layer header is there. So this 1480 bytes is a payload. 1480 bytes is a payload at IP layer. Payload at IP layer. This is very important to understand, right? Payload have at a link layer, payload will be what? Whatever the data received at a IP layer, that is, suppose in this, let us say it is a 1480 plus the header of the IP layer, that combines in the combined number is payload at a link layer. So at a link layer, payload will become 1500. Further, link layer also will add the header, right? So the link layer like Ethernet header is a Ethernet have the 18 byte header, 18 bytes header is there. So if I say that a frame size is 1518 bytes frame size is there at a link layer, frame size for the Ethernet links. So 1518 means what is a payload? 1500 bytes, because 18 byte is a header for the Ethernet. So payload definition at each layer is a different. Need to, again, I emphasize on that. So at a IP layer, what is a payload? The data which is received, including the header IP layer, means that includes the application header, application data plus application header plus the transport header. This combines is basically payload at IP layer. When IP layer adds its own header field, and then after that it becomes the you can say uh, application header, application data, transport header, and IP header. The sum of all these becomes the payload at the application layer. Link layer. Okay. So this is so now if it is so your fragment size is more than IP datagram size is more than 1500 bytes, including the header. More than 1500 bytes. Specifically, I am writing including the header. Okay, header of IP layer. Then the datagram needs to be fragmented. On which link? Ethernet link, right? So if a different link is there, maybe some link it is 576 is a let us say MTU value, then it should be within the 576. Maximum it can be 576. Less than the 576 is okay. Similarly here also for Ethernet link, 1500 byte is a maximum allowed. If it is less than that, that is okay, no problem. But more than that, then it needs to be IP datagram needs to be fragmented. So now, according to this logic, what will happen? It may be possible on this link because it allows the larger datagram size, but the next link, immediate link, is not allowed. Its MTU is less than or less than what the MTU was there on this link. So then it needs to be fragmented. Your single IP datagram needs to be fragmented, right? And then fragmentation in IPv4 protocol, this fragmentation is done by the router at IP layer itself. And so it looks like means another activity for the router. One thing they do, that routing and forwarding, they are primarily responsible for that, but this is additional task actually. And that is the reason, because of this additional task, because the in IPv6 basically they have removed this fragmentation, that okay, we will not do any fragmentation at a router. There is a separate solution was devised. Right. So similarly, from its so that's why in a journey from source to destination, in this journey a datagram may be fragmented multiple times. So here maybe this datagram. So now individual datagram. This is individual datagram. This three datagram. One datagram converted into three or divided into three. Now further on this link MTU is lesser than whatever this link has. Then maybe every individual datagram may be further divided into. Right? This can be divided into two, this can be divided into two. Now, what is the problem actually? At a transport layer, hand over this big datagram here, and the at a sender side. Receiving side, suppose this is a receiving node, this is a sending node. Sending node give this large you can say segment and to the IP layer, and IP layer convert make a datagram and send it on the link. Right? Now, receiver is expecting the same datagram size, right? The receiver is not expecting multiple datagrams, right? So this needs to be, when it reaches to the destination, here the destination node, this router, what should it do? It means the IP layer at the receiver, that should reassemble the entire fragment, not at the router. At here the IP layer, that it should reassemble the entire all the fragments of the a datagram and give a single datagram to the receiver transport layer. because transport layer is not aware that what happened in between, and it's not aware of that how many datagrams are there, and it anyway it cannot do anything with the datagrams. It cannot reassemble. So only IP layer did the fragmentation. So reassembly also done by the IP layer before it is delivering to the transport layer at the receiver side, right? So this is called as a fragmentation and reassembly. So why fragmentation is done? Because of it is every link have the different MTU are there, and now do this means how to do this means how to how many fragments, how it will divide in a large datagram into different fragments. For that we'll take an example, right? So this is 3 datagrams are received, and then the reassembly is given to the this transport layer. So let us take example of this. Let us say 4000 byte datagram is there. MTU of the link is 1500 bytes, right? So 4000 datagram. So in 4000 datagram is received, then in this datagram basically we have 20 byte header and 3980 bytes is a payload. So this is a complete datagram. I call this is a datagram. Okay. And this is payload in the datagram. What is a payload? In this payload, what is included? Transport layer header, application layer header, and application data. 3 things are there in this payload. And 20 byte IP header. So essentially I need to fragment this 3980 in a such that each datagram should not exceed more than 1500. Now, so what are the fields? So because, and from the reassembly point of view, I need to put a sufficient information during the fragmentation in such a way that so the reassembly can be done, right? So what it is doing, 3 fields are there. First of all, for each fragmented datagram, it will use one ID. So a unique ID will be used. So suppose this ID is something X, right? So, and then the this flag. So I will tell you what is the purpose of the flag and offset value. So let's do this fragmentation first. So what is the maximum data I can take it from this such that it is not exceeding more than 1500? How much data I can take it?
1480.
1480, because 20 byte IP header has to be attached separately. Then it will become 1500. So after removing the 1480, how much will be left? So 1480, if I remove 0, 0, 5, 2, 2500, 80, yeah. So my first fragment, so my first fragment length is what? So the length will be 1480. So there is a length field. So ID, flag, and offset. 4 values it will put for each fragment. So length is 1480. Okay. ID, okay, let us say X. Some number is used. Okay. ID is a 16-bit field actually. So 16-bit number can be used, unique number. And all the, so last flag will be the value for the fragment, the flag value for the last fragment of the datagram is 0. Other fragments value, flag value is 1. So this is a first fragment. It's not a last fragment. So the flag value is 0. Basically this convention is used to know that, okay, once you get the 0 flag fragment, that means this is the last fragment. Actually, there is no fragment after that of this datagram. So at the time of reassembly, this information will be used. Okay. So an offset value. Now offset value is specified in the units of 8 bytes of chunks. So offset value will be used when it will reassemble. Then it will say, okay, first fragment where to place. So byte starting byte 0 to this byte, and then the second fragment it will receive, then it will put it here, and third fragment. And if the third fragment last bit flag bit is 0, then it say, okay, my entire fragment, sorry, entire datagram has been reconstructed actually. So let us say 3 were there in that case. So we'll see that how it will happen. So offset value will be 0 in this case because this is the first 1480 bytes of this larger datagram, right? Now after that 2500 left. 25 is also more than the MTU, so one more fragmentation is required. So one more fragment will be required. So 1480 I will remove from that. So 0, 2, 1, 1, 1120, right? So the length, this is also a full length, you can say datagram. ID will remain same because all fragments will have a same ID with the help of ID only, because there may be 2 datagrams which are fragmented. So at a receiving side, when the reassembly is done, based on the ID, it will identify, okay, this fragment belongs to which datagram. Again, this is not a last fragment, so its flag value will be 1. What will be the offset? I said that offset value is specified in units of 8 bytes chunks. So what will be the offset? So in 8 bytes, if I say up to 1480 divided by 8, it is 185. So 0 to 184 is my first fragment offset value. 185 onwards, second fragment is starting. So what offset value will be there? 185. And offset value is units of 8 bytes chunk. So this is very important. Why it is used, this convention, units of 8 bytes? It will take lesser space for the offset. Otherwise, my offset, well, it takes more bits to store the offset, and that will incur more overhead actually in the protocol. Now, this is less than 1120 bytes are left, and this is less than the MTU size. So I can use it as it is. 1120 is the length, and ID will be same.
It's 1020, sir.
It's 1020. Yeah, sorry, 1020. Sorry. Okay. So 1020, ID will be X. What will be the flag value?
0.
This is the last fragment, so it's a flag value 0. Okay. And the offset value?
So 390.
370.
390. Oh, okay.
390.
370, yes.
185 into 2, na?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. 370.
370. So it is a 370. Okay. Now you see that, okay, these 3 fragments, these 3 datagrams are moving in the network. Let us say further links MTU is not a problem, means all the MTU is not less than the 1500. So that's why they can through. So this actual size, means total size including the header of this datagram is 1500. This datagram also have the 1500, and this datagram is 1040. These 3 datagrams are now arrived at the or received at the receiver side. Now, before delivering these datagram by the IP layer to the transport layer at a receiver, it needs to reassemble. So what it will do, it will suppose it may be possible these 3 datagram arrive out of order also, because they are traveling through multiple links, and you know that in a datagram network, even a datagram which is sent first, that may arrive later than the second, right? So so now you can understand like this. Suppose it receives first this datagram, fragmented datagram. So first it will check it, okay, it is a flag 1, so it is not last, and its offset is 185. So it will put this as a offset 185, and based on its length, it will say, okay, up to here it is received. Now let us say it received the this third datagram. So third datagram flag is 0, means there is no further, and offset is 370. So it will start from here and up to here. So here this third datagram, so I say this is first one, this is second one, this is third one. So second one is put it here, third one is put it here, and still it will not deliver this to the transport layer because these bytes are missing. So it is still waiting for one more. So now let us say this arrives. This arrives means it is at offset 0 to 184. So 0 to 184, this will be, now it is complete. There is no confusion because 0 is also received. So that means no, and all the offsets means the entire you can say byte space is now covered. there's no gap is there. So it is that a single datagram is constructed and now it can be delivered to the transport layer. Right? So now just few minutes, we'll take 2 minutes, I'll take to complete this thing. So this actually, this fragmentation is completely, you can say, eliminated or removed in the IPv6. The reason I'm telling you, this fragmentation creates some kind of a different kind of attacks can be created by the malicious user or attacker. Means a malicious user, what it can do, it can send the fragmented datagrams without sending the last fragment, means without setting the fragment flag value 0. So then what happened, the receiver is always waiting for means that last fragment, and last fragment anyway attacker is not sending, right? So this kind of attack is very common, right? And maybe not last, maybe sometime the first the starting offset to that fragment is not sent. So any of the fragment is missed out, and this way the attack can be created, and due to that the resources at because that buffer will be occupied, and the resource crunch can be created at the. So like that multiple such fragments, it will send thousands of means datagram fragments it sends, and neither of the datagram is complete, means one or two fragment is missing, and then the receiver will not be able to process these partially received fragments. So due to that, because it's vulnerable, your system is now vulnerable due to vulnerable to such kind of attacks. So that's why in IPv6 they say that okay, this fragmentation will not do. So now how to deal with this M2U problem? They say that if any router receive a datagram of size which is more than the next link, more than the MTU of the next link, then this router will send that okay, the datagram is too big or something, a error message it will send, and that error message